Good morning and welcome to Walk Before You Run. Today, let's walk through the book of Esther, um, chapter 2, and talk about being exiled to be exalted. Exiled to be exalted. It says, later when King Xer- Ze- uh, I'm sorry, Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendant proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Now, some theologians say that um, there was a first search for virgins when Queen Vashti was chosen, and that this is the second time that a search for virgins would take place. And during this search, let's see who he finds. It says, let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women who please the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the city of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among those taken captive was Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been declared, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai, her cousin, had forbade her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatment prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning, return to another part of the harem to the care of Sheashgah, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. Now, the concubines were women who the king had slept with, who he did not take as his wife, as his queen. She was sort of his wife, but more like a mistress. that was kept in the palace just in case he wanted to spend time with her. Now it says, when the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to come to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now, the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the province and distributed gifts with royal liberty, liberality. Now, remember, we talked about a different banquet that Vashti had, and how the king was trying to impress these same nobles and officials and have Vashti to come out and display her and show her off to show, what all he had. He had already shown his power, he had already shown his wealth, and then he wanted to show off his wife. And she said no. And that's the reason why she was not made uh, queen. And Esther was made queen in her stead because she didn't want to go with the shenanigans that he was displaying. And so he has Esther to come. Verse 19 says, when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Some theologians say that Mordecai was some official. Some say that he had office in the palace. Others say he just positioned himself at the gate so that he could be available when the opportunity came for him to meet with his cousin. It goes on to say, verse 19 says that Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. 20 says, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. And this was all this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. So now they had been exiled, and now God is putting them into position to do a great work for his people. So Esther, or Hadassah, goes from being a part of a people who were exiled, put out um, of their country, to being put in to the palace to do great things for her people. And I like that uh, Esther was not trying to impress, wasn't trying to do anything beyond being who she was, and yet she found favor. And when you find favor with God, God gives you favor with man. And that's what he did with Esther, because Hagar, he um, gave her everything that she wanted or needed, and because she found favor with him. And then she was a smart lady. Not only was she beautiful, but she was smart because She didn't know what would please the king. She didn't want to become another concubine, but she didn't know what would please the king. But she was smart. She knew somebody who did know, who had been in a palace, who had seen women come and go, who had seen virgins go to the king and then be sent um, to the place of the concubines. So she knew that he would know best what would please the king. And so she told him, "Don't give me anything other than what you think I should have." And that's what you call young wisdom, young wisdom. And so she did what he said do, and the king found favor with Esther, and she became not another concubine, but the queen that sat by his side. And so God had taken her and her people from exile to be exalted. If we are obedient to God, we don't have to worry about trying to raise ourselves up, trying to make a place for ourselves or a name for ourselves. If we are obedient to God, and I like what it said about Esther, it said that um, she, in verse 20, it says, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality. That's not what I'm impressed with. But I like this B part. It says, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. And that's just a lesson to us that when God picks us up and puts us in a position of power, we should not forget the things that he taught us when we were not in that position. And if we don't forget what God has taught us along the way, he will exalt us to the positions that he needs us to be in for us to do a great work for him. Thank you for joining me today. I ask that you go and read the book of Esther. When I come back and we walk together again, we'll be looking at some more of Esther. I'll see you next time. Always remember to walk in God's word before you try to run out and do his will. And always remember that we are all blessed so that we can be a what? You got it, a blessing to someone else. I'll see you next time.